The following presentation is a gift from the team at Streamline Publishing, publishers of Fine Art Connoisseur, Plein Air Magazine, and weekly newsletters Fine Art Today, Realism Today, Plein Air Today, and American Watercolor, and events, the Plein Air Convention and the Figurative Art Convention. We offer over 400 different art instruction tutorials and ultra high-quality video by the world's leading artists. If you like what you see, help us support our artists and our team with your purchase. Each video aired has a special discount code for today only in the comments section with a link to the video offered. And to see everything we do, or if you want to receive notice of new releases, new products, and new events for artists, simply click the other link, which says, see everything we do. Thank you.
So what exactly is this global virtual painting event called Plein Air Live? Well, first, it's kind of like our Plein Air convention. It's people like you who are interested in growth, working on themselves and on their painting and how you show up in the world.
This year's amazing faculty includes the incredible Jill Carver, landscape legend Scott Christensen, the incomparable Kevin McPherson, Catherine Statz, Joe Paquette, and many more to come.
Let's make our own personal growth a priority and be one as a Plein Air community worldwide. Hi, I'm Eric Rhodes of Fine Art Connoisseur and Plein Air magazines. Today we've got a classic for you, one we produced way back when Johnny Lillidahl was alive and running the company. This is called Green Bottles and Apricots. It's a still life painting from Jeff Legg. Enjoy.
Hi, my name is Jeff Legg, and I'm a still life painter primarily, and today I'd like to do a painting with you, a demonstration of this setup. And many people ask me why I choose to paint what I choose, and just to kind of give you an idea of how this particular setup came about, I found this green bottle in a shop, an antique store somewhere, and I've actually never painted it before, but I just absolutely love the color. Green is one of my favorite colors, and it has warm tones mixed in with it, and I just thought it was a beautiful piece. And then I really began to build a composition around this initial inspiration of this jug, this bottle. And I then found these eucalyptus leaves, which I rarely find leaves that have the reddish mixed in with the green. There's some kind of red tones, and they get greener as they go up. And just thought that would be a beautiful combination with the green, the complementary red-green colors. And then the apricots, they have this beautiful intense orange and a little red that complements the green as well. And so the idea was to basically set something up that would be pleasing to the eye, interesting to look at, have a variety of sizes, shapes, and colors, and something that flows naturally and has maybe even a bit of an orchestration to it, or a musical quality in the rhythm and the harmony in how things are laid out. Taking into account, as I set it up, just the contrast, contrasting black grapes with green grapes. Laying these leaves against the bottle so that I have some cast shadows that will help describe that dimension of space. Having some leaves in the background that pass behind the main subject, the bottle, which adds another layer of depth to this compositional idea. Might also add that although the drapery looks very natural, it took a while just to get it laid down in a way that, number one, looked natural, but also had shadows in the folds in a way that would help describe the form of the drapery and just create some interesting lead-ins with this, say, this shadow that comes up to the grapes. And then there's a cast shadow on this side of the cloth. And it's purposely, hanging a grape over the edge here with the cast shadow. Helps slow the eye down as it moves from left to right. Most of us read left to right in our culture. And so as a general rule, I try to paint or set up a composition and paint it in such a way that you naturally want to look at it from left to right. So the things on the left are maybe a little less defined, and as your eye travels through the painting, things become more focused in the primary area, more to the right of the painting. And I've decided that I would do a vertical composition for this piece, and I've done a sketch here that the process I usually go through, once I come up with an object such as that bottle, I will work up a thumbnail composition just from my imagination, what I think a good composition would look like. And for the sake of the video, I've done it much larger than normal. Normally it would be half this size or less in size as far as my thumbnail sketch, but so that you can see it better here, I've done it larger. And as you can see, my concept or my sketch here is very similar to the setup. It's not exact, but it gives you the kind of the gist of the values and the going from dark to light, and some of the compositional elements of the leaves and the positioning of the fruit. So that just helps me in my mind kind of establish my concept and where this painting is headed. And it also, by doing a simple sketch, it reminds me that I want to keep this painting very simple. It doesn't have to be complex or incredibly detailed to be a powerful painting. So with that said, I think we'll talk a little bit about my materials. Starting with brushes. I use a variety of brushes, mostly filberts, hog bristle filberts, from a brush that's about maybe 3/4 of an inch to an inch wide, down to about a 1/4 inch or even an 1/8 inch width. I find that filberts are very versatile brushes. You can do a lot of different brush strokes with them. I also have in here a few soft-haired filberts. They're actually synthetic hair, which I find clean much easier and last longer than a sable, and they're quite a bit less expensive, which is nice. So I have a couple of large soft-haired filberts here, and a couple of small ones. And then I have a couple of rounds that are soft hairs for more fine detail work. And I've got a palette knife, fan brush, which sometimes comes in handy for breaking edges, and a big flat brush, which is nice to knock down, smooth down a background. So I'll set these brushes aside here, and we'll talk about the palette of colors that I'm using today. Starting on the left here is alizarin crimson, cadmium red deep, cadmium red, medium, cadmium orange, cadmium yellow, medium, cad yellow light. This is cad lemon, Naples yellow, yellow ochre, sap green, viridian, cobalt blue. This is ultramarine blue, transparent red oxide, raw umber, ivory black, and flake white. This is I have 3 piles here of colors that I've pre-mixed, which will become my background color, and that consists of ivory black, yellow ochre, and white. And it's the same mixture, except that there's one that's lighter value, one that's medium value, and one that's dark. They have different amounts of white in them. Now I don't necessarily use all of these colors in this particular painting, but I do like to have them available if I need them. Also, the medium I'm using is Merige medium, which is a Flemish medium that is very nice to work with. It helps the paint dry much more rapidly than just straight oil paint, and the paint also dries with a freshness to it. It looks like wet paint even after it's dry, and it's also suitable for glazing as well as building up more texture. So it's a very versatile medium. That's this amber colored pile right here. Also, I'd like to talk about the board that I'm painting on. This is just simply masonite board that has been pre-primed with gesso, and I have toned this with raw umber and cobalt blue. Very little cobalt blue, but just enough to make it a little bit cooler than just straight raw umber. And I've just simply brushed it on and then taken a rag and given it a very uneven surface. It's very smooth, actually. It may look rough on camera, but it's a very smooth panel. And the smoothness, as you can see, it's dry as well. I wait till this is dry before I paint on it. But the smoothness is sort of a double-edged sword in that it's a little more difficult to work on initially because every brush stroke you put down tends to be emphasized and show, and it's not a very forgiving surface. But the advantage of a smooth surface is that it reflects light back to the eye much better and gives that paint more of a luminous look than on a rough surface. Also, because it does show brush strokes, you can use that to your advantage too in describing form in your objects with brush stroke and building up textures that might be more difficult to build up on a rougher surface. I also paint on linen, usually portrait linen, some kind of very smooth, fine weave canvas linen. But oftentimes I'll paint on the board, and I do switch back and forth. I think I probably paint on board more often than I do linen, but I enjoy both surfaces. Usually a piece this size is at least a 2-day, if not a 3 or 4 day process. And of course I don't have that long to do this demo, but I will step you through the my thinking and my processing of how I approach this painting, and I'll bring it to a level of, probably about 80% finished before this is over with. And then the painting will have to be taken into the studio, and I'll continue to work on it. It won't take, any great changes will take place at that point, but there'll be some subtle refining of the painting. Every painting is an adventure. Changes happen, mistakes happen. Sometimes happy mistakes happen, happy accidents, as they say. But the main thing is that I did do some pre-planning. I have my thumbnail, which I worked up, and that gives me a good idea of what my concept is, because I really want to have that concept or that idea just firmly implanted in my mind before I start this. And I just want to visualize this as a painting. I've thought about the setup, and I've actually imagined it in my mind what this is going to look like as a painting. And I can't tell you how important that is to use your power of visualizing before you start your painting. If you don't, you really don't have that much of a roadmap. Many times I'll sit down and I'll go through the painting stroke by stroke and try to paint this thing before I even start the actual painting. I'll paint it in my head. And this helps me a great deal in just getting this painting moving in the right direction. And of course, there's many things that happen along the way that maybe are unexpected, or passages that in the painting that are more difficult than I thought to solve. And there'll be some problem solving that I may be dealing with. There are times when I may even change the composition or add something to it or take something out that I've maybe halfway through the painting realized maybe that wasn't such a good idea. But that's part of the beauty of oil painting, is that things are changeable. You can wipe off, you can paint over, you can manipulate the paint in many different ways. Okay, so I'm going to take my largest bristle brush here first, and I'm just going to dip into this Merge. It's just pure Merge medium, and I'm going to just wipe a little bit, just a very thin layer of Merge right on the surface of my board. And this does a couple different things. Number one, it'll kind of act as a glue and help the paint to adhere to the surface of the smooth board. And two, it will, instead of painting on a dry surface, it's a little bit wet so that my brush glides a little bit easier on the surface. Merge is pretty slippery, which is kind of nice, because then you get the very nice smooth long brush strokes. It would be more difficult on a dry surface. Now, this is a very thin application. Okay, so I'll take some black, and I'll take some raw umber, mostly raw umber, a little bit of black, and this will be what I'm going to do the lay-in for the painting with. And the lay-in is not to be detailed in any way. It is simply the basic, simple shapes that I see. And you might notice too that I'm not going to get very linear with my brush strokes. They're going to be mostly massing things in almost a silhouette fashion. And I think the first thing I'm going to do is kind of determine where the tabletop, maybe move it up to about right there. So that'll probably be my tabletop right there. That's this line right through here. And then at this point, I want to determine what's my right and left hand parameters. You know, where is this apricot on the left going to be, and where these grapes, these green grapes on the right, the furthest right, are they going to be here? Are they going to be here? So I want to set those parameters, and I think I want them about here, and I think I want the, see if the vase is just off center to the right, and then we've got a apricot here, and then the other one I guess will be about right there. So I've established this as one parameter and this is the other. Let's see, maybe it'll be about right. Well, somewhere in there. So that's at least gives me something to work with, that I know that I'm going to fit the composition into that space. And well, starting with the vase, or the jug, or whatever we want to call it, the bottle, since that's the biggest object, and it's kind of what the painting is all about, I'm going to mass it in first. And I'm not getting real, worried about whether my shape of this vase is exactly right. I just want to get it just a pretty good rough in of the height of the neck, the width of the bottle. I think if this is my apricot here, I think that may not quite leave enough room for the grapes. I may just want to move that bottle over to the left just a little bit. So I'm just going to wipe off part of the right hand side and move it over. So this is the time to make that change before you're halfway finished with the painting, and then go, oh, I should have had it an inch to the left. It's much, much easier to make that change now. So now my apricot is here. That gives me room for my grapes over here. And this handle is something like this. So as I block this in, although it doesn't have to be extremely detailed, I am trying to be fairly accurate in my drawing, and that I want these size relationships to be fairly accurate to what I'm seeing. Okay, and then we've got this cloth that comes down, and I'd like to see some of that cast shadow from the cloth right there. And so there's this apricot here, And then the cloth comes down, kind of drops down, and we've got the shadow here. And 3 grapes here, and then they're casting. There's another fold. This mass of grapes comes up. So this is all just a grape mass, and I'm just going to maybe have a couple of green ones poking out here. And then we've got some grapes here, which hang over the edge. And I've got a cast shadow from that grape. Forgot these cast shadows from these grapes here. Okay, so we have this apricot here. With its cast shadow. And then this other apricot right here. There's a little grape in front of it. And that cloth kind of continues back behind the vase. And then you've got these leaves that are also back in the background. I think we'll be just sort of dissolving into the, off to the left here. And then this leaf now obviously we have these leaves to deal with, and I think just so you can see this better, I'm going to rub out the this apricot right here. I know where it is, but you might not know where it is. All right, so we have this leaf that overlaps onto the vase. I'll just rub that out. And then this leaf overlaps that leaf. And you might notice that I'm doing all this with just this big brush, which keeps me from getting detailed. If I was using a tiny brush, I'd probably be tempted to be really trying to be more detailed than I need to be at this stage. Okay. And then this leaf comes in, and it is in front of the bottle a bit. It comes down about an inch from the apricot. And then we have one more that overlaps. Right in there. Okay. And then this one is back behind that one. And then this stem comes up, and let's say we're going to actually see a leaf up here. And then this one's going to come off the canvas right about here. Now, I've kind of set this box up so that I have a little bit of a overlap, which I thought looked kind of interesting. So that's kind of the way I lay in things in the beginning. And I know that this is going to be kind of a darker area here because I want to contrast the lightness of the bottle, the light side of the bottle against a darker background. And so I think for the sake of making this a little less boring, I'm going to just lay in a few brush strokes here that might add to the interest of the painting. I want to lose my handle here where that's located. Now, before this dries, I think I'll take my fan brush and I'm just going to knock down some of these ridges of paint. Those ridges can be kind of annoying. They catch the light in a way that you don't really want them to, so Just kind of go over the whole painting. Okay, I stepped back for a minute and took a look at what I had, and I think I'm fairly happy with how it's going so far. I think I do want to go ahead and darken this area down a little bit more. Because later in the painting I'll be applying some paint over this dark paint. So I'm just kind of thinking ahead for what I'll be doing a little bit later. All right, so I think at this point I could lay in a little bit of background color. I take my big softer brush here and go into my darkest background green. Probably not really complete the background at this point, but I just want to get a little bit of it started here. I'll wipe the brush out and go to the little bit lighter color for the background. It's mixing in a little bit, but not enough to really change the color. And actually that background is already a little bit dry. That Merge it's set up a little bit, so it's not like really gooey wet. Are you mixing Merge in with this layer too? Yes. Yeah, all the paint has Merge in it. I'm going to go a little bit lighter so that I'm showing the dark side of the bottle against a bit lighter background. A little bit right in here. And then again, as it goes away from the bottle, I'm going to get a little bit darker. So I'm cutting in around these leaves with this background paint. And all the while I'm thinking about, is this a light leaf against a dark background, or is it a dark leaf against a light? And so as I come down lower here, see, I have dark grapes, so I'm going to lighten the background as it approaches the grapes, because I want to show the the dark against the light. So I'm always thinking of darks against lights, lights against darks. I'm going to paint some of this darker background color right into the vase itself. So that'll help turn that vase into the background. I may even take the lighter value of the background and put it on the light side of the vase. So that'll help turn that edge. Having some of that background color in the vase. You're probably getting a lot of glare from these different directions of these brush strokes, but like I said, it'll be smoothed out. And then just bring that stem up like that, and let me connect. I'm just scraping the paint away for these stems. Bring this dark up just a little more. I like to keep my backgrounds a little bit abstract. It's a little more interesting sometimes than just a flat surface. Okay, so I'll clean my palette up here just a bit. And we're going to go into color here, this next step. Well, I'm going to start with color, but it'll be the tabletop, and then we'll get into the focal point, the primary area of the painting. Okay, so we're going to mix up a mixture. It's sort of a warm gray for the tabletop. Put a little raw umber in it too. So that was yellow ochre and black and white and a little raw umber. And I'll just hold my palette knife up here, and I can see it needs to go a little lighter, so I'm going to add more white. And get enough merge in there so it dries along with all the other paint. That's pretty close. I just go a little bit lighter. Now there's just a sliver of table showing here, but I want to go ahead and get that established at least. Get right up to the edge of that cloth. It's better to paint past your, paint into your mass a little bit, into your adjacent object rather than right up to it. That way you can have a seamless transition between objects and they don't look outlined or anything. Because I know when I go in and I paint this cloth, I'll be painting right over, you know, the edge here where I painted in. See that I missed a little bit of this table. Will extend on over this way a little bit. Now, as that table goes to the left, it goes into the shadow. So I'm going to paint this a little darker. And the front of that edge is always a little bit lighter. So I'm going to take some of the same color and just make it about a whole step lighter in value. And let me just apply that with my palette knife right along that front edge. I use the palette knife because I just want the paint to be a little bit thicker in that front edge, and it'll appear a little more dimensional. Now just take some of that I just added and just pull it up into the table a little bit. A little bit more here. It's always amazing how that just this little bit of value change from the front edge of the table to the back as the plane goes in, just that little bit of value change can make a really big difference in how your eye sees this table. All right, so well, I know I want to go right for the central area of the painting, the part that is the focal point, the part that's the painting is all about. I want to put all my energy, all my light, all my color right in the apricot and the jug and the contrast of the cloth against the wood. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the vase and get some of these darks in, and then I'm going to go right into this fruit. We'll see how that works. I think I'll just move some of this color aside here. I might need it later. Well, so I got to determine what color this is, but not so much what color it is, but what temperature. And I'm seeing it as a fairly warm, but not as warm as the apricot, of course. But first I'm going to dip into the Viridian. I know it's dark, so I want to use dark colors. And I think I'll dip into the alizarin crimson because that's a nice dark color. A little more Viridian. And then I'm going to go into the Cad Red Deep. And then into the black. A little more Viridian. See how that looks. So I'm just more concerned about the value and the temperature than I am specifically trying to identify what color it is. A nice, deep, rich color. Again, I'm painting right just past where that apricot is going to be because I don't want to leave a gap between that color and the color I lay in there for the apricot. And it's getting more green as it moves up, so I'm going to add more Viridian, maybe a little bit of sap. Trying to kind of avoid the use of any white right now, because I want to keep the colors in this bottle just as rich as I can and as saturated as I can. And it gets a little warmer as it moves to the left because it's picking up some of that reflected light from the apricots on the left side. Just some beautiful color in there. A little bit of cad yellow, medium, to start getting this green. Just kind of going to hint at it right now. I'm anxious to get into the apricot here, so I'm not going to complete this bottle at this point. Just kind of painting around this leaf. And then there's some red orange right in the bottle here where the apricot is actually reflecting right into the bottle right there. It's very important that I keep these reflected lights dark enough. So I squint. I didn't mention squinting, but squinting is just so important. When I'm looking at the setup, I'm constantly squinting at it so that I can see the values, and it filters out, eliminates a lot of the detail, and helps to simplify the value shapes so that I can see values. And also, squinting is very helpful in seeing the reflected lights, how they should be painted. Our eyes have an amazing ability to see into shadow, but we don't always want to paint it quite as clearly as we can see it with our eyes. So I tend to want to paint things in the shadow as I see them with my eyes squinted. So that ultimately just means that the reflected lights are played down so they're not too exaggerated, because they'll look contrived if you don't squint and paint it the way you see it that way. And there's a little more warmth down here in this dark color too, just to warm that up just a little bit. A little more orange in there. Put a little bit more of that bottle. Okay, so just do a little bit more on the vase here, and then we're going to get into the apricot. Clean my palette off here a little bit. Okay, so the shadow side of this apricot is first, and it is very warm. Now I'll take some of this cadmium orange, cad yellow, maybe just a little bit more yellow. I can see just real obvious here that I need to maybe raise the base of this vase just a little bit, because I want to make sure that that apricot looks like it's in front of the vase. And while I've got that mixture, I think I'll just put a little bit of that color over here. And this apricot is more in shadow, so I just want to make sure it doesn't look as lit. But we're just kind of blocking in some basic colors right now. A little more light on this one. So the idea here is to make this one in shadow, this one a little bit lighter, and then finally this one the most bright, so that your eye progresses through the painting and goes from dull, dimly lit, to lighter, and then to finally to the brightest area. Go, just put a little bit of white in this mixture now. But not much, just enough to bring it up in brightness a little bit. Okay, let's see. Just want to round this up a little bit because I see a little bit of the ellipse of this curvature of that base. And I'm going to go right back into the bottle, which means I've used up my greens, so I'm just going to apply some of this with my palette knife. And I'm not mixing the color completely because I like seeing a little bit of that semi-mixed paint. And it's probably a little too light a value. I'll darken that down. You really can't be too thick in the lights with your paint. Mix a little of that red in with it to tone it down. As it goes up the neck here, it's not quite as bright. And I'm just manipulating the paint that's already on my canvas or my board, I should say. The real challenge here is to make this have all this beautiful color in it, but at the same time, I don't want to lose the basic form and structure. And if I make it too fragmented with color or value changes, then it's going to lose its ability to hold together as a form. I see more red in it here. This may be an instance where I would do some glazing over this bottle tomorrow after it's dry. We'll see if it's going to need it. Now the neck of that bottle seems a little bit wide, so I'm going to take some more background and just cut it in just a little bit more. I'm seeing a fair amount of gray in the light side of the bottle, so I think I'm going to go ahead and mix up just some plain gray, just black and white. A little Merge in it. A little bit lighter.
When you're calibrating the Merge into it, are you putting about equal amounts?
No, probably about 25% Merge. Depends on if I'm, wanting just what the consistency of the paint, how if I want it really loose or almost glaze-like. So I'm just going to lay this gray right on top of the green. Make it a little bit lighter right in here, where just kind of where the highlight is going to be. I think I'm going to, at this point, smooth out some of that background. And just dry my fan brush off here and knock this down a little bit, because it's starting to set up dry and I don't want it to be totally dry. There's actually a stage at which this is drying that's sort of the optimum time to flatten it out. And we're close to that time right now, so I'm not really too worried about getting some of the background into the edges of the bottle. It'll actually help the bottle sit into the background.
Did you fan a bristle or a synthetic?
It's a bristle. I think I'll take my synthetic soft one now and just kind of go over it. It'll make it a little bit softer than that fan bristle. I always want to end with my strokes going down so that it doesn't create a glare. I can go horizontal to do some blending, but I want to end up vertical. I even want to take a little bit of the brush stroke, the texture out of the bottle, where the bottle is curving into the shadow. I don't want it to have too much texture, because if it has texture, it won't properly recede. Now I can see at this point I really need to lighten that background up a little bit more in this area. So I'm going to go right back into that lighter background color. Just a little merge in with it. I'm going to the next shade darker and blend it into this other, so it's more of a soft transition. Gives it shadow on this side. Creating the texture on this bottle in the studio would be a process of probably many layers of paint and pushing and pulling values until it got to a point that it really felt like it was dimensional. I do see more, just more warmth right in through here, so I'm going to just really punch up the warmth here. Just going to soften this edge all around this apricot, almost giving it a bit of a halo. And I will reestablish that edge, but I want this to really have a sense of atmosphere around it. I don't want to forget the little cast shadow coming out underneath that. Now this is the part of the painting that can be pretty tedious. It doesn't have to be, but it takes a little bit of finessing to get it just the right value, the right amount of cools and warms, and get everything to turn, get the form to turn. And many times this will take more than one pass over to get it just where I want it. Be a little bit lighter value right in the middle of that apricot right in here. And I think I'll step back for a minute and look at it from a few steps away. Hi, my name is Jeff Legg, and I'm a still life painter primarily, and today I'd like to do a painting with you, a demonstration of this setup, the board that I'm painting on. This is just simply masonite board that has been pre-primed with gesso, and I have toned this with raw umber and cobalt blue, very little cobalt blue, but just enough to make it a little bit cooler than just straight raw umber. And so starting with the vase, or the jug, or whatever we want to call it, the bottle, since that's the biggest object, and it's kind of what the painting is all about, I'm going to mass it in first. And I'm not getting real, worried about whether my shape of this vase is exactly right. I just want to get it just a pretty good rough in of the height of the neck, the width of the bottle. And it's getting more green as it moves up, so I'm going to add more viridian, maybe a little bit of sap. Trying to kind of avoid the use of any white right now, because I want to keep the colors in this bottle just as rich as I can. And it's very important that I keep these reflected light's dark enough. So I squint. I didn't mention squinting, but squinting is just so important. Put a little bit more of that bottle. Okay, I think I'm going to begin to put some color into these leaves here and get those to the value and the color that I see. And I see a little bit of blue in there. They're almost purple. It's kind of one of those colors that's hard to identify. But it is a beautiful color. It's kind of pink, kind of purple. I'm just kind of making sure they're going to be shaped and ready to paint. The Marager medium is subject to humidity changes, and the more humid it is, the slower it dries, and it's fairly humid here in southern Texas. I'm going to just give these back here a little more interest in the way that they're laid out. I've noticed that I just painted these stems exactly the same height, so I'm going to rub this one out just a bit, and then I'm going to extend it a little bit higher. I think this is about as far as I'm going to take this painting. I'm going to take it back into the studio and do some refinements, and hopefully just bring it into a little bit tighter focus in some areas. And I appreciate you joining me in this painting, and hope that it was helpful, and hope that I helped you see kind of my way of thinking about how to approach this subject. Thank you for being here.
Well, that was Green Bottles and Apricots with Jeff Legg, and you can learn more about it at lilyartvideo.com. Remember, there's a special discount code in the comments section for today only. Take advantage of that. Thanks for watching. I'm Eric Rhodes.